No, so we are recording, everybody, so you know. So whatever you say is going to be recorded, and we will share this out there. So don't say anything you don't want out there in the public. Welcome, everybody. This is actually the kickoff and the start of a new series that we're doing here at AMRI, sort of called Access to Capital Montana. And AMRI, for those folks that don't know, stands for Accelerate Montana's Rural Innovation Initiative. And we're funded under an EDA grant, which created a university center at UM to focus on early stage entrepreneurship and innovation across rural Montana. So we do that in lots of ways, but really it's all about creating a supportive community for entrepreneurs and innovators across the state. Really working outside of Bozeman and Missoula and those hubs that stuff's already happening, we want to look everywhere else and bring the support and activity that you might see if you're in Bozeman or Missoula to all the communities in Montana. So that's our goal. And this conversation here, this conversation about access to capital, we've heard that accessing capital in rural Montana can be very difficult. So we've invited the Montana Cooperative Development Center to discuss today how this might help, how investment co-ops might help projects or entrepreneurs in the state. So very simply, with that, let's get started. Tracy, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carl, for having us. It's our pleasure to be here today. We love talking about co-ops, and I know that a couple of my team members actually find these to be their favorite types of co-ops. So we're excited to be introducing this to a new audience, and we'll have ample time at the end to ask questions. I'm going to go through a handful of slides, if I can get my slides to move forward. Fire the slides. Okay, sorry. You would think by now, with all the Zoom work, we would know how to, but still throws me for a second. So today we're going to give you a brief overview of who we are, what a co-op is, how co-ops are formed, really then get into what we're calling the opportunity development co-ops, which are investment co-ops, different examples, and then we have members that have actually set up or are setting up co-ops in Montana to kind of give us some highlights and then some questions and answers. So, and now it's going fast on me. Okay, so who we are. So we have two organizations in our office. The Montana Cooperative Development Center is a 501c3. We're the statewide economic development organization that focuses on addressing community and economic needs through the cooperative business model. We also then serve all existing co-ops across the state as the Montana Council of Cooperatives, which is like a trade association. So when you start working with us and you form a co-op, you go from the very beginning until there is no end. So we're here to support the cooperative community across the board. Services that we provide, as I said, we're a statewide resource. We do facilitation. We really walk you through how to set your own co-op. We can do business planning and economic development resources. A lot of times we don't work alone though, we work with partners and really bring in the local economic development organizations. We do have a background for financing, so we can help you with funding scenarios and applications, and then just connect you to the larger cooperative community. And really, we find ourselves just kind of filling gaps and needs as people request or we find other resources. Today, I do have a couple of my team members that are joining me. Davey Madison is our program director, and Nicole Borner just joined us. She's with us for a couple of years through an EDA program, which is the Economic Development Administration. She's focusing work on investment co-ops as well as some broadband and hybrid models. I probably should have introduced myself a little bit more. So I'm the director, been with the organization for about 2 years. We have two new team members that are also listening in. Tanil Filestill is our Native American specialist. And then Sophie Nelson is a VISTA program director for childcare. So we're working in a broad spectrum of areas and needs in Montana. Part of how we work is that we contract out to economic development organizations, because Montana is a great big state. And though we do have people kind of all over the state now working remotely, we still have these connections. So entry points into cooperative development can be found with these local economic development organizations. They kind of have the base training of cooperative development work. And then there's just a whole ecosystem of cooperatives. I think a lot of people don't realize how vast the co-op world is in Montana, that we work closely with the Montana Credit Unions, the Electric Cooperatives Association, and the Telecommunication Association. And then we also have accounting professional and legal professionals that we bring to the table as needed. And then we did an impact study in 2020 about what the co-ops are doing. And this is all forms of co-ops. Those are your electrical, your ag co-ops, any of those. And it's a $7.6 billion industry. And that's not with all the co-ops in the state reporting in. And so we are making a pretty significant impact in the state. We just like to kind of point that out, because I think people often will say, well, co-ops are just my utilities, or it's just a supply store, or it's just my credit union. And actually co-ops are covering multiple different sectors. And those services that are being provided are actually pretty essential to the overall economy and communities of the state. Davey, am I missing anything yet? You'll jump in if okay. So what is a co-op? In the simplest terms, it's an enterprise created by a group of people who join forces and work together to solve problems, or they reach a goal that they all share. I'm going to go through the next slides pretty quickly, because I think you guys will have access to them and you can read more details in. But all of these are types of co-ops. So you'll see we've got our Three Rivers Communication, their inner telecommunication. Agland's one of our ag co-ops. Cruciables is a new worker co-op. We've got a poultry growers cooperative, which is a producer-owned one. Just you can see across the board that co-ops are pretty vast. Riverside Crossing is our first housing co-op that's happening in Hamilton. And then in Montana, there's over 160 co-ops. That number kind of changes a little bit as we're seeing some credit unions expanding, and then others are consolidating. Same with our CHS, or not CHS, but our farm and ranch communities. We're seeing some consolidation and some work happening there. At the end of the day, it is really important to understand that cooperatives are membership owned, they're membership controlled, and they provide benefits to the members. They are formed because the members, which are owners, are seeking some type of a service. Whether that is community-wide or whether it's 2 to 3 people that are trying to find it. Co-ops have a lot of flexibility in the state, and so we have a lot of different ways that we can address needs in a community utilizing the cooperative model. We have 4 different structures. There is the Cooperative Association, which is a for-profit entity. This is where we find most of our new work happening and the new co-ops are forming. We do have the 2 agricultural associations. These are tax exempt. They're not like a nonprofit, like a 501c3, but they do have that component to it if they qualify for them. And then we have our cooperative utilities, your electrical and telecommunications, and they also have a tax exemption. Most other states have a nonprofit corporation with exemption stock. So we are a little different in the fact that we have this for-profit model, but I think it gives us that flexibility to really be responding to the needs of Montana's communities. This is kind of a repetitive slide now that I'm looking at it, but at the time, the way to look at it is that you can have all producers, which is like ranchers and farmers. You can have consumer owned. So if you're looking at a grocery store or something along that lines, you have all of those, like the community can own it. Worker owned are the employers, or you can have a hybrid model. And that's actually one of the things that Nicole is working on. We're seeing more and more interest in these hybrid models where we'll have multiple ownership structures and how that works in the state. And then they can have a variety of functions. These are marketing, purchasing, and shared services are kind of our traditional, more common functions of a co-op. And I've said that one, so I'm not going to go over that again. 2 forms of ownership in the sense that we have common stocks. These are the owners. These are your members. They have voting powers. They should be very engaged. Co-ops work best when the members are actually involved. And then you can earn patronage. Not all will earn patronage. It depends on what kind of co-op you set up. But like our farm stores, if you are patronizing or going in and buying stuff and utilizing it, then at the end of the year, if there's a profit, you can get a return on that based on how much you use the co-op. And then our preferred stock, it does not give you an ownership in the fact that you won't vote. You actually have no say in the control of it, but you are investing in that cooperative. You also receive your dividend first. So if the co-op has a profit, you receive your dividend and your investment back before any of the common stockholders get their patronage. We have, so co-ops are not new. They've actually date back to like 1776. And they are a global form of business. There's 2.6 million co-ops, and well, this is in 2014. I'm sure that has grown a little bit. And it's over 12.6 million people work for a co-op, and over 1 billion people belong to a co-op. So they are definitely not something that's new. It's not a new age thing. They've been around for a while. In the mid 1800s, these 7 guiding principles were formed, and we still, across the whole world, when you form a co-op, these are the principles that all co-ops follow. These are very important to us, and we work when our office comes in and works with a group. We talk about what these principles are, the meaning of them, and really this is what kind of separates the cooperatives from other business models. When you're forming a co-op, this is where you work with Davey and the team. You go into an exploration, and really we're trying to see, does the co-op work for the need that you're trying to solve or for what you're working on? This exploration usually includes some type of an introduction meeting, whether that's with your entire community or with just interested parties. But we try to kind of come in and talk to you about what is a co-op, what does it do, would it work? Then you go into this planning phase, and the majority of the time that you spend with our office is in this. You form a steering committee. We like to see that between 5 to 7 people, sometimes more, sometimes less. And you get into feasibility planning. You do your business plan, you do your performance. You really are building that company, because a co-op at the end of the day is a business and it is a company. So you need to do that planning phase. Then our office will help you walk through all the legal phases, which actually is the filing and getting your pledges and your membership laid out. And then you start moving into operation and implementation. So what are opportunity development co-ops? How am I doing on time? I think I'm okay. Okay. So opportunity development cooperatives are they're part of that chapter 15. So they're a for-profit co-op. And they really are very flexible. We're seeing them formed by a variety of different people, but they are a means to pool your funds and your resources together to do projects that are based in your community. And so when we say that they're local solutions for local people, we really mean that. It is the locally driven economic development. And it's really focusing on investing back into your community. How do they work? So just like any other co-op, if your community is interested in doing, looking at this to say a lot of our work right now is in housing and childcare. We're seeing a lot of businesses come together in communities to start looking at the investment co-op to either build or to invest in childcare or housing. Investment co-op can sell common stock and they do preferred stock as well. What we're seeing is a lot of the opportunity development co-ops keep their common stock very low and affordable, so most community members can participate. And then based on project, they offer those preferred stock options. So say there's 5 people on this call, we're all members. We all pay $100 in to be members on common stock. We all have equal share and equal voting rights on what kind of projects. But then Davey really, really wants to support a school renovation for housing. It's not really something I want to do. I'm really for supporting that downtown business. I can do a preferred stock to help that downtown business where Davey can instruct her money to go into it. So that comes into that flexibility on how you can offer different stock options too, based on the projects that your co-op has decided to work on. So when I go through examples, that might clear it up a little bit. You invest in what your co-op has designed. What we're seeing is a lot of real estate. In the past, the opportunity development co-ops that have been formed really are focusing a lot on real estate. They buy or they rehab real estate, and then they either incubate a business in it or they're doing housing, and that's the return as that rent comes back. Others are choosing to establish revolving loan funds. And so they're working either in conjunction with an economic development organization that already has a revolving loan fund, and they help manage that. And then they're investing in local businesses. And when those businesses pay that loan off, that loan goes back into the co-op. The co-op then has a return back to the individuals that invested in that revolving loan fund. So we're just trying to give you examples of the many ways that these investing co-ops can work. It is very important to realize that if you set up an opportunity development co-op, is not something that can be purchased or sold or changed without the entire membership. And so that's where when co-ops are formed, and that's one of the bigger benefits of them, is that everybody's equal when you become a common stockholder. And so there's no one person that can have 52% of the shares and can decide how that co-op is moving forward. It truly is across the board. What we're seeing is that opportunity development co-ops really are sparking economic development. They're creating jobs. It's working for business succession. We're supporting entrepreneurs, and we're just seeing a lot of local leadership and really empowering local communities to take over their own future. They're deciding what they want to do. And then I mentioned this already, it is developed underneath the Chapter 15. Montana law is going to cap your returns on your preferred investment. If you've invested money in, you're capped at 6% annually. We want to stress to people that even though this is an opportunity to do local investment, you are not probably going to get rich off of an opportunity development co-op. Your investment really is about the community and the social side of what you're doing. You are working towards improving your community with hopefully a return. I'm going to pause for a second because Davey loves these and give her an opportunity to jump in if she wants to say anything further before I go into some examples.
I don't think I have anything further, but I'll just kind of echo what Tracy said. Like, these are something that is really a community. It's really community and social investment. And so that's why we've kind of changed the language a little bit to not call them an investment co-op. So people aren't thinking they're going to come in and have, like, make all this money. This is really something that is for very community specific. You can definitely have one that is broader, region-wide, statewide, or whatever, but we're really seeing these more of these kind of smaller scales for particular towns or particular communities. And they really do have a lot of possibilities that we haven't even tapped into yet. So Tracy will go into the examples in a little bit, but there are examples of ones that do revolving loan funds that, have sort of business incubation models. So there's all types of different things. And going back even further to what Tracy said, is that our Chapter 15 laws really do allow us to be really, really flexible. So we can really be really creative with how we can set these up and what they're used for. So the possibilities are, I'm sure there's an end, but we haven't found it yet.
Thanks, Davey. So I'm going to give a few examples of different co-ops. And the ones I chose range from very small towns to very large communities. So Sangudo, Alberta, this one is probably one of the first investing co-ops that we are aware of. What Sangudo Opportunity Development Cooperative has done, it really has changed this small hamlet up in North Alberta. And they have invested, I don't know exactly how much, but what they have done is they purchased buildings and they've rehabbed them, and then they've incubated businesses. So the community has a rich ranching background. They had no local producer or no local processing. So through their opportunity development co-op, they bought a building, they rehabbed it for a processing center, and now they have a local meat processing company that actually has grown to a point where they've bought it from the co-op. And now the co-op can invest it into different ones. So they're actually kind of moving into new investments. Now they're actually looking at housing opportunities. And down below on each one of these slides, when you get them, is the link to their website. And then I encourage people to watch these videos. This photo right here, the man in black, his name's Dan Oler. He's actually come to Montana. He's kind of a mentor of ours. He's becoming known as kind of the guru on investment co-ops for us. And he's just a wonderful man. And he really kind of in Alberta, which kickstarted a lot of this local solutions by local people, is really Dan has played such a huge role in it. So, and we also encourage you, if you go onto our website, 2 years ago, we had Dan on a webinar where he really talked about Sangudo and all of the work that Alberta has been doing. And you may think it's funny that we're talking about Alberta, but because our state laws, so co-ops are globally a global form of business, but they're very much controlled by state or province laws. And so our state laws actually mimic Alberta a lot more than they do other US states. So it may seem a little strange that we're talking about Alberta, but we actually have a lot in common with them. Wolfville, Nova Scotia. I don't know a ton, I wish I could go see them, but I haven't. But this is an older investment co-op. It was formed in 2011, and it really was to invest in farmers and helping them. It promotes and provides kind of food production and distribution by local foods. Again, their website's here. What I found fascinating about there is this is the next slide. These are all the loans. So this is a revolving loan fund program that they set up. And these are all the different projects that they have throughout Nova Scotia. So since 2011, they have made a huge impact on their area, on their food supply. And since Montana is having some concerns with our distribution and local food options and stuff, this is just a great example to show how we could be utilizing a statewide investment co-op if we so chose to really address some key issues in our state. In British Columbia, I'm from Eureka, Montana, so I actually know the Creston area pretty well. So Creston and the district community, so kind of the southeast corner of British Columbia, they have the Community Investment Co-op, and they are doing investment capital. So they too are doing a loan, short-term capital. They just formed in 2016. Their first loan was 2017. Encourage you to take a look at everything that they've been doing. They have a large regional one, and just kind of working local residents saying, hey, we want to see a change in our community, and we're going to pool our money together and invest in local businesses. Midville, Pennsylvania, they have the Northwest Pennsylvania investment. This is a pretty new one. They just closed on their first property in 2021. And this is actually what they're going to be making. So they invested in the real estate, and now they're working with this new business, Blissful Meads, to set up a meadery and tasting room. And so it kind of fits onto their history as well as creating a new company. So we'll see where these guys go. They're purchasing, renovating, and then leasing it back out. Minneapolis, Minnesota. So again, trying to show you the vastness of how we can use these from larger communities to our small rural ones. Northeast Investment Co-op is another one of our older, as in 2011, investment co-ops. The two pictures here is of a brew house and a bakery. And so what this group did in Northeast, it's a component of Minneapolis. The community said, you know, a lot of rundown buildings here. We're having a lot of issues with different things. So they've pooled their money together, bought buildings, they're renovating it, and now they're incubating new businesses. And they're purposely designing it to attract businesses that enhance their community needs. And then before I do that, now they're actually going into housing too. They have two projects. This is their first one. They've just built and renovated a building and are renting them to housing for the neighbor in the neighborhood. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Borner, who is working for us, and we're so excited to have her on board. She joined us in December, but she actually is the chair of the Muscle Shell Community Investment right here in Montana. So Nicole, you want to take it from here? You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, I have to unmute. Zoom etiquette. Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Muscle Shell Rural Investment Cooperative. So we were the first rural investment cooperative in the state of Montana. And what had happened was in 2016, the school board had slated to demolish this historic central school. They had passed a bond and were building a new school on the eastern part of the community. And this has been our school for over 100 years. And there was a group of us that were really concerned about this beautiful historic structure being torn down. We also worked really heavily on community economic development projects. So we formed, it was first a small group that formed, and we went to the school board and asked them if they could give us an opportunity to find a way to save the school that would contribute back to our community. And so the school board held back on their demolishing of the building and gave us 3 years. So during that time, in the very beginning, we were working with Kathy Bailey out of Snowy Mountain Development Corporation, our economic development partner for our region in Montana. And we were just, visiting with anybody we could to find a solution to how we could save this building. And in that process, we came across the developer, Randy Hafer, out of Billings. And we kind of started some discussions with him. And as all these type of discussions are in communities, there's just a lot of ideas that get thrown at the wall to see what sticks. And through that conversation, we thought that maybe there was a way to do some. Kathy had heard about the investment actually out of Canada, and so then we connected with MCDC and worked with Jan Brown at the time to form the rural investment cooperative for our community. So we started working with MCDC. They held our hands on forming the cooperative, from everything from how we get our steering committee together, and then helped us really through the whole financial and legal side of it. And MCDC was just there to help us through the whole entire process. And we were very grateful for that. And what it ended up being in our community was the group of us that were working on this really looked at this as an anchor project in our community for economic development, because we're like a lot of rural communities in Montana where we see a lot of our older buildings, our historic buildings deteriorating and not being used. And so the larger project of this was, we really wanted to save this historic building, which in our view was also our cultural heritage, because, you know, for 100 years it had been the school, and so many children have their memories, you know, in this building, and it's beautiful. This building is also connected to it was the multi-purpose room when I was a kid. It was built like in the 1960s, an addition on to the historic building, and the county had got a hold of that and turned that into a senior center, and there's a breezeway that connects the two of them. So we really thought of this as an anchor business opportunity that would pull the whole community together. And then through this process, the developer has donated his portion of the property back to the city, which was the playground for the grade school for 100 years. So that project will continue to work forward, but it meant that this central location in our community was an anchor project. It saved our central school and gave us the opportunity for the community to invest in this particular anchor project. So what we did is we worked with a developer. He created shares for his project, and then our rural investment cooperative created the structure for community members to invest at a level that they could invest at, till we raised a particular share to buy into the development, the developer's larger project. So it gave a vehicle for the community to participate in our economic development, and created the first rural investment cooperative in our state. And so I don't know if anybody has any questions. I hope that kind of explained everything, but our project is slated to get started this spring. There was a little bit of a delay on that, but it is moving forward, and it'll be multi-use. So it'll be housing, public space, and business opportunities. The building is like 36,000 square feet. It's huge. It's got a basement, the main level, the upper level, and then there's a loft level too that when I was a kid, it was just a storage area where the bell tower and all that's at. But in its earlier iteration, it actually housed students and teachers. There was like rooms for housing up there. So it's really cool. And we're really excited to be able to save that building, have it tie to our senior center, and then have the playground updated. So there's an existing community space and Roundup.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So in terms of questions, Tracy, Nicole, all of you, do you want to take questions now, or do you want to wait to the end?
We either or, it works for us. What we have left is Davey was going to go through new projects that are coming forward, but we could definitely, if people have questions for Nicole right now, I think that would be great.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's just stop for just a couple of minutes here. If anybody has a burning question on the top of your mind, you want to ask Nicole about this project, let's do that while it's fresh. You also could put it in the chat, type it up if you want to do it that way, and I can read it. Remember to take yourself off mute. I still make that same mistake.
I'm off mute. Can I ask a question, Carl?
Please go for it.
Thank you. Nicole, thank you. This is a great presentation. I was very interested in the structure of the project that your group is working on. So you were able to get a private developer to come in and fund the project and let the cooperative buy into it?
Yes.
Okay.
So the shares to buy into his project was $25,000. So we then created that's how we determined what the cost of the common stock and then the preferred stock would be, so that people could buy in, and then we raised enough money for one share. We were only able to raise enough money for one share. We were hoping to do more, but you know, as with any community project, there's a lot. We were the breakthrough project, so there was a lot talking and conversation, and there's people that are for it and against it, and all the stuff that goes around. But basically that is it in a nutshell, is the developer created what he needed to renovate that building, and then we were able to raise enough money to buy one share of that project.
Okay, and people could buy how much stock? Could each person only buy one?
I believe you can only buy one common stock, but as many preferred stock as you wanted. And then the common stock is the voting. That's who our membership is made up of.
Yeah, if I'll jump in there, Sheila, that's across the board for any co-op. Common stock, you can only have one common stock. So if all of us on this call decide to create a co-op, nobody could buy more than one common stock share. But you could invest more through preferred stock, and there's usually, unless the co-op for some reason caps it, there's no requirement to say that you couldn't buy 5 or 10 different preferred stock shares if you so chose. And I may never be a preferred stockholder. I could just be a common stockholder. So again, it's the way that you structure your co-op that really would dictate how that is done. But no matter what co-op you're in, you only ever get one common stock.
Can I ask a question?
Please, Gail, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy and Nicole. This is super interesting. From beginning of when you first wanted to start saving the school and thinking about what you could do with it till when it's going to open for business, about how much time lapsed? How much time will that be?
Well, the school, from the time that we went to the school and asked them to give us time to figure out what we could do with that was about 2.5 years. It kind of took us that much time to really find MCDC and do this. We knew they were out there, but we didn't know what that was going to look like, right? We kind of explored a bunch of different opportunities. At that particular time, I was a county commissioner in Roundup, and I was really trying to get that building to stay in public ownership. And so I was working with the hospital, the city, and the county to try to get them to, and the school, to keep it so it could stay in public ownership. And so we explored all those opportunities, and we just couldn't get that to help to get traction. So working with Snowy Mountain, because we worked very closely with Kathy Bailey on what can we do, that's how we found the cooperative investment model, and then worked with MCDC. And so I think, Gail, that was about 2.5 years. And then it probably took us about, I don't know, maybe 6 months after we knew that this was the direction that we were going to go, to get everything formed. And then I'd have to kind of go back and look at some paperwork, but I think it was, I don't know, I feel like it was within 6 months or so after that we raised enough money for the one share. I felt like that went pretty quickly, because we had been pretty vocal. I mean, I was anyway, I was pretty vocal about saving that school. So the community was pretty well aware that we had been working on a project for quite a while.
And when will it actually open for business, or is it already?
No, it starts, the construction portion of it got delayed. We were hoping to start it last spring, but that didn't happen. So this spring, I believe the last update that we had from Randy Hafer was about 2 months ago, and he has raised all the capital, because and that's actually a really interesting conversation. And I don't really understand financial structure well enough to explain it, but he was using historic tax credits. It was a pretty involved financial structure. So it took him a little while to kind of get all those pieces together. I think he finally got them together, and then construction starts this spring. And then I think his goal is to have it within a year, but everybody knows how construction projects happen. And this is a pretty big, like I said, it's a 36,000 square foot building. It's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then just one more, Tracy, the preferred stock versus common stock. And that's based on your membership status. Is that right? Or
Yeah, so common stock is how you become a member of a co-op, and that's regardless of what kind of co-op you're doing. That buys your membership, so that buys you the right to be a member of that co-op. It gives you your voting rights to select your board of directors. Any major changes to the structure of the co-op itself, it has to go back to the membership for that. And then preferred stock is strictly an investment stock option. So you do not gain any additional voting rights. And you also, again, depending on how the community or individual set up the co-op, you can put in your requirements that you can't be a preferred stock unless you're a common stock, or you can be a preferred stockholder and not be a common stockholder. So it has that flexibility to really respond to what your community is trying to accomplish with it.
And I'll just add to that a little bit. The way that we, when I'm helping new co-ops develop, we always suggest that you keep your common stock membership at an affordable price so that you can get more membership there, and then also keep your preferred stock at an affordable price. So say you do, $250 shares or $500 shares, and someone, if they have, $10,000, they can for sure get those shares, but then you get more buy-in from more folks if it's at a price that's more affordable for the whole community. And then it also gives you a larger investment pool to start, getting those funds in. So keeping those things, and I think when we start the process, we always say that, every co-op we develop, we have no cookie cutter approach. Every single one is unique little snowflake. So we really do try to match the co-op to the community that it will be serving. So as you go through that process, during that planning process, when you do that, start looking at the feasibility of what you're doing, you'll start to kind of figure out, what does that look like? What did our common stock look like for a price? What does our preferred share price point need to be? How many people do we need to have engaged to make this work? And those are all things that we help you work through as you go through the process.
And I'm gonna add, Nicole hit on this, the Muscle Shell Rural Investing Co-op, they decided to create it to where they were purchasing a share, and then they layered, so that developer layered a multitude of other programs. So co-ops are a form of business, and we can use different programs within the co-op. So that's part of our role, is to work with your local developer. If you're doing a massively large project like Roundup is, part of our goal is to make sure you have those other resources available, because your co-ops may not be able to do the whole project. Like in Roundup, it wasn't going to raise the money to do the whole project. It helped bring the community on board on the project. So there it comes again. You're not going to see like this huge return on your money, but it was important for that community to be engaged with this project. And so it brings that kind of local ownership into local community growth or preservation.
Yeah, and you couldn't have said it better, Tracy. I think that's really, really important. And I also, just from my community's perspective, it was really important to have a project like this that we got community involvement in, because economic development it's always, it's a process, and you have to get your community on board. You have to get your local leaders on board to understand how that investment is so important to your future. It's livability, it's the economic tax base, it's all of it. And so this project really was about that. Tracy said it just right.
Great, thank you all. Any more last questions at this stage, or should we move forward and have some more questions later? We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end.
I think I saw a question in the chat.
Oh yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, so will the co-op receive a percentage of the project's cash flow since they are invested in a share? Anybody?
Nicole, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer to that.
So I don't know. I don't think I ever saw the actual agreements between it, but because they bought a share, so whatever that developer has offered all shareholders, the co-op receives that same agreement, or whatever that agreement is for the share. And so then when the developer pays that back as a shareholder, the co-op then can divvy that out. I think with Muscle Shell though, they have opted to say returns on the first project will go back into a new project. So that's the other thing, is that co-ops co-ops have on an annual basis, regardless of what type, an investment co-op, a farm supply co-op, whatever, when they, at the end of the year, the board can look at and say, okay, do we have profit? Can we return money in patronage or dividends? Or do we need to build our reserves? Or what do we need to do? And so that kind of comes into a play on an annual basis on how they return money back to their shareholders. Now, in the state law, Davey, correct me on this one, every 5 years, if the common stockholders and preferred stockholders have not received a dividend or patronage, they can request the board to review and ask why they're not, if they've held it for 5 years from them. So again, it allows, there's no cookie cutter approach, but in this case, if they receive those shares from the developer of the schoolhouse, the board will decide if there's enough profit from that share to return back, or if they'll roll it over into a new project.
Great, thanks, Tracy. I've got some question about setting one up, because I know there's a few people on the call that are considering that. So let's, Davey, why don't we move on and talk about that next?
Perfect. Well, I'm going to turn this over to Davey, and Chile is going to talk about who is working on them, because these are definitely kind of kicking up on our work schedule. We're seeing a lot of interest in them.
So there's a lot of interest in them because I think these are the coolest like form of co-op that we can do. And so anytime I go somewhere, I like pitch these like crazy. And so I just like plant all these seeds, and I have a couple growing right now. And actually Vaughn from Baker is on the call with us, and they are just working through their process right now, starting in ones in Baker. So I'll let him talk in a second. I'll just kind of go through kind of the ones that we're seeing popping up and how people are considering using these right now. So we have, obviously, like Tracy said, we're working in all of these different various industries and all over the place, but we do have a lot of work happening around trying to help with the childcare situation and the housing situation, which are all kind of feed into workforce for the state. And so right now we have a community exploring, they're in process right now of working through to set up an investment co-op that it's going to actually, the primary focus is a child care center, but this is actually a group of employers that are coming together saying we need more spots, child care spots for our workforce. And so how can we help make this investment into building a facility where we have child care? But of course, they want to, they're business people, they want to see a return. So they're actually looking at how do we make a multi-use facility where we can maybe eventually have housing or, other commercial space. But the kind of primary focus is making sure that we have this center set up with all the requirements for this childcare center. So that's kind of their impetus, but they're seeing all of these other options that they can do with this. There's lots of things going on in their community that they see it. So could they help with some of the housing issues? Could they help with childcare? Could they help incubate some smaller businesses? So they're really looking at it that way. We have another very, very small community that is looking at it, and they're really interested in maybe trying to figure out, can they do micro loans? They're a very small community, but they have a pretty active nonprofit that's working on doing some restoration of some of their smaller old buildings. And so now they're trying to say, well, can we use an investment co-op to do these micro loans so that, we can get some smaller businesses started up in these buildings that we're already saving. So the one thing that I always say is that an investment co-op isn't going to solve all your issues, and those partnerships with, nonprofits or other organizations or developers are really important. But can this be, a stopgap sort of can this be gap financing for some of these smaller businesses, for some of these projects? Can this help in some way? We have another community that's looking at using their investment co-op to help with historic preservation. So again, they have a nonprofit partnership that is working on historic preservation. And so the co-op would sort of be their investment arm for that. So could the investment sort of act as the investment developer for them? And then, they would make a return on that when they would get, a business or a person in there to lease. So they would kind of act as that landlord piece for the nonprofit. And we also have them popping up, around different housing types. They're kind of all over the map. I'm really excited about them because I just see so much potential in that you can really be really creative with how you do it. I think as long as you're thinking, is this going to be a profitable, venture? Because I think we want things to be profitable. But there's so many ways that you can do it. And especially if you can get kind of your community rallied behind it, like Nicole's community did, like you can make a pretty big impact. And you can really spread that out and get more in community and civic engagement. So it's very cool. I'm very excited about it. I could talk about them all day. But I won't. But I'm going to let Vaughn talk a little bit about, he's heard me do this spiel, I think 3 times now. So that's why he's doing one, because I got him excited about it. But I'm gonna let Vaughn talk a little bit about kind of what they're doing in Baker, and sort of they're in their early stages and their early planning, but they're moving full steam ahead. So I'll let Vaughn talk a little bit about his experience.
All right, thank you, Davey. For those that are on the call, I'm Vaughn Zenko. I'm the executive director of a couple different like separate but related nonprofits in town, including the local port authority. I'm the executive director of that. And we here out here in Baker, as I'm sure in most communities in Montana, for the last few decades, we've recognized major problems. 2 big ones, in fact: housing, affordable housing specifically, and just underutilized properties. We have a lot of dilapidated, vacant properties, even in just the downtown corridor. And just nothing has been done with those. I mean, they're useful properties, could be turned into housing. And Davey came here to Baker to actually talk about a different kind of cooperative. But I was there, and the neat thing about cooperatives is the flexibility of what you can do with them. And so it got my mind going on some sort of a real estate investment cooperative. But not in like some of these other communities. They're like, hey, let's buy a property and then we're going to flip it and it's going to be great. Ours was more of specifically, we want to get these vacant properties that have been sitting around in town for years. I mean, we've got an old movie theater that's been here for 30 years that's just sitting right in the middle of downtown and no one has done anything with. There's an old bar that's been there for 20 years and it's just sitting there. And out here, as I'm sure a lot of Montana too, these are family properties, and there's been a lot of oil booms and busts. So people sit on these things. They're like, there's going to be another oil boom, and someday I'm going to be able to sell this property for $1 million. But and instead they just sit there and are not used and make the town look bad. So we came up with the idea of this investment cooperative to try to get a hold of these properties, identify these underutilized properties, and try to turn them into something that's going to be more attractive to developers. There's a lot of people interested in real estate out in Fallon County, but some of these properties are so contaminated. Some of them have been here for so long. There's worries about asbestos and lead paint and stuff like that. So what's neat is because I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, then we can work together as we're forming this co-op. We'll be able to get some of these grants and stuff like that to clean up these properties and to fix some of these things that a general contractor or general developer wouldn't be able to get. So we can find these properties. If they need cleanup, we can clean those up because of our connection and our association with the nonprofits. Our co-op will be able to do that. And I mean, the plan is to find houses, refurbish them, make them livable, find buildings. There's plenty in town. There's actually one big one that used to be apartments right in downtown, and it's just sat vacant there for 40 years. I mean, the apartments are perfectly fine. You need some obviously some upgrades to them, but there's several apartments just sitting there not used for 40 years because no one wants to invest that money or spend that money to refurbish this. So it's and in Montana too, you've got a lot of community pride. So we've just, we're thinking that we're going to get these investors. People want to clean up the communities. Everybody recognizes these ugly properties. So we're hoping for lots of investors who are going to be able to get in. You're going to start seeing results just right away. And so far, we put together our steering committee. We've been working. It started with I called Dave and I'm like, hey, here's an idea, and we've taken off since there. Just over the last 3-4 months, we've got our steering committee together. We put together our bylaws. We're working now on. We've been slowed down a little bit. I had some emergency medical issues that have kept me on the sidelines for the last 3 weeks or so. So we had a little bit of a hiccup there, but we're working on putting together public meetings and stuff. But it's really gaining steam, and really everyone we talk to in town about it, whether it's city council or county commissioners or just the general public, they're super excited about this idea of cleaning up the downtown area, cleaning up a lot of these just eyesores that are around town and around the county that everybody recognizes, but nobody does anything about. So that's pretty much where we're standing right now. Davey, if there's anything you want to add, or if I'm certainly open for any questions.
No, thanks. And I think you kind of hit on something there that, you get the more excitement you get, the more people you get to invest, the bigger that pool of money is, and the less risk that it is. You don't have to be a millionaire to come in, and you don't have that whole responsibility on just one or two people. It really is going to be a community sort of investment project. So I'm very excited. You guys are moving full steam ahead, and it's very exciting. So I'm really excited to get you guys up and running this year.
It is. It's fun. A lot of the interest, even from the senior center, people who have been here, who grew up in Baker, they've been here for 80 years. They're like, oh, I can't wait to invest, whatever, and it's, so that's, you talked a little bit about making those shares affordable for people. But there's a lot of people in town that want to invest in improving this town. And I think most towns in Montana will see something like that too, with these co-ops. Anything else? Any questions? Anybody?
Yeah, thanks, Vaughn.
You bet.
Any questions for anybody? Put them in the chat.
Carl, I'm going to add a couple. Davey mentioned the housing. We are seeing kind of the same type of concept happening. We got one community of business owners that came together. They had opportunity to buy lots. This is in a resort community that really is starting to grow super fast. And their workforce is gone. They can't find housing. And so we've got this community of business owners. What's interesting about them, they had to move quicker than a co-op could be formed. So they did an LLC to purchase this initial property. We'll be converting them on over into a co-op now. And I don't know who asked the question earlier, but I think kind of leading in, co-ops do take some time to form. We don't sugarcoat that. I think at the fastest we can get one forming is about 6 months. Now that is dependent on who is leading the charge on the local level. We, as your co-op development center, we can't project manage it for you, right? So we're providing this assistance. We come in, we help guide, we're there, we can come in and do some facilitation work, but it's really about the people on the ground leading it. And so if you want to move faster, we move a little faster. If you want to take your time and you meet only once every 2 months, that's your call. And so those are kind of things is we get asked all the time, well, how long will it take? We've had co-ops formed in less than right around that 6 month mark. We have ones that are taking 2 years. So it really is dependent on what you're working on and who's at the table. So I think Vaughn really hit it. You can see the leadership and the passion he has for it. He's helping bring that passion across the board. Same with what we saw in Muscle Shell and Roundup. There was some community leaders that said, let's do this, and got people excited about it. But you need that core group to really put together all the details. And that's the core group we work with is we're there for that core group to go through all the details, get your bylaws done, and then we help you get through all the filing and everything too. So there's a lot of steps, but we're there to help you get through those steps.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat. Anybody want to?
Can I just add real quickly to what Tracy said regarding the question I'd gotten earlier on how fast it happened? I think the it did happen kind of quick for us when we set up our investment cooperative, but part of that was because we had done a bunch of work beforehand because we'd worked with Snowy Mountain. So we had addressed a lot of issues beforehand. So when we knew that this was the direction we were going to go, it went a little bit quicker because we'd already kind of done all this back end work on it. So I just want people to be aware that because we've been having a conversation for a couple of years about how we were going to use that piece of property, some of that work had already been done on the back end. So
Thanks for that. I've got one question in the chat here from Aubrey. Has thought been given to executing a community benefits, moved agreement between developer and co-op when they invest into a project?
As with any investment, if a co-op is doing an investment into something with the developer, you want an agreement. I'm pretty sure there's one for the mussel shell. I don't have it in our records, well, in my records, but yeah, you want agreements. Again, these are forms of businesses, so you want to do everything written and signed and that kind of stuff, so you have that paper trail.
And I'll just add to that just a little bit. Like a co-op is adheres to basically all corporate law. It is considered a corporation, so it can enter into partnerships. It can own other LLCs. It can own other businesses. It can own other co-ops. It can do all these things. Anything that a corporation can do is the same thing that's done in a co-op. So it really is following all of those things. So anything that would be done, between a developer and developer and investor should be done the same way with a co-op, and it should be all done. We don't have a lot of examples of that yet, just because we've only done a handful of these, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to help people walk through those processes as we start to develop more of these.
Great, thanks. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, has there been any discussion on raising the cap given the stated and real rate of inflation, the cap on return?
The 6%, absolutely. My board doesn't know this, so I might get in trouble for saying it, but we're starting to lay some of the groundwork with some legislators and seeing if somebody would carry it. The deal is we can only go to 8%. There's actually a federal cap at 8%. I don't know. I know that we belong to the National Cooperative Business Association, which really is kind of our link into all of the federal stuff. To my knowledge, nobody is trying to raise that cap. So if we get the state, it would only go up to 8%, but 8% on a local return, that's not horrible, really.
Absolutely. And is there any limitation on how fast you can return the capital from the stock purchase?
No, as long as the board is reviewing it annually. Davey, you want to?
Yeah,
I saw her look at it, so I should let her answer that one.
Yeah. So the both the nice thing and the terrible thing about our MCAs for a cooperative is they are extremely vague. But there is no, like, if a co-op decided I want to do this quarterly, that would be their decision. The only thing is they do have to review annually, and they have to, at your annual meeting with your members, you have to review books, and they do have to have an annual discussion about returns, because that's when you're doing your accounting. But if a co-op decided to do it quarterly, as far as we know, and I've actually asked that question to our lawyer, there are no restrictions on if you wanted to do that more than once a year. But that would be something you'd have to set up probably with an accountant, and however that would work. But we don't see anything that would prevent that currently.
But let me clarify, please do not go to your local electric co-op and tell them that we said that, because the utility co-ops have a different return process. So they do their capital credits and stuff, and they have a different tracking. So they're on a different MCA and stuff. So the ones that we're talking about really are either an ag association or a co-op association. So what we've talked about today does not necessarily apply to the utility co-ops. And so just to make sure nobody goes in, knocks on their utility door and say, I want quarterly capital returns, because that's not going to happen.
Any other questions out there? Take yourself off mute. Not hearing any at the moment. I've got one. So given that it takes 6 months or longer to set up a co-op, this would be for any of you, I suppose. I know there's several people on the call, and I just talked to somebody this morning in Ravalli County. Would it be easier, or would you recommend trying to be part of another investment co-op first, rather than setting up one for, you know, a relatively maybe smaller project?
I think that has some pros and cons to it. What the smaller community that Davey mentioned earlier definitely did explore that. So two things to keep in mind. One, does that co-op have some restrictions on themselves? And so what did they set up as? What was their region? Do they have any restrictions on, can they do a preferred stock offering or something there? The second one, and probably the one that we would be more concerned is the agreement. So if it was Ravalli County, let's say Ravalli County wanted to go underneath one with Missoula, and Missoula already has one, they don't, but if Missoula already had an investment co-op, that board of directors is based on that ownership of what they currently have and how they're set up. So how that representation and membership works for them to go under is something that we would really want some really good discussion on, to make sure that there's that equal representation and that democratic process happening, in the sense that if a different community was coming in and another one, are there members that, and then what happens if that community that wants to come in underneath an existing co-op, what if they want to separate out? Then we've got to figure out how to separate their members out too. So long game, I'm not sure I would recommend it, but it would shorten the process for sure. So pros and cons, and we would really want to talk to what's the purpose and what's your long game on it. A small project that's in and out probably would make sense.
Great. Is there, sort of quick follow-up on that, is there one set up yet sort of statewide? So far we're talking about communities in terms of relatively small geographic areas. It is possible, right, to set one up that would be sort of an investment co-op for statewide support of small startups or projects or something.
Yeah, absolutely. We could do that. And that's kind of the Creston example was a larger region. You know, they're covering quite a region of Southwest or Southeast British Columbia. So we could definitely look at a statewide one, and then what those investors would look like and stuff. We would just, again, figure out who the members would be. We do have one, like in the ag world, looking at a statewide project, but you know, whether or not it gets off the ground, we'll see.
And I think, you know, in terms of doing a statewide one, I think it would be a great idea. But I think when we would set that up, we want to make sure that, you know, really thinking through identifying members and like what the goal of the co-op would be. Like, is this loans? Like a loan program would be a lot easier to do statewide than a real estate investment for sure, just because of how big we are. But that's something as we would work through that process, trying to figure out, you know, what makes sense for a statewide one, and how do we set it up in such a way that your bylaws really reflect your membership and that your representation is always there for all over. I'm from Eastern Montana, so I'm always like, we need to remember that Eastern Montana is like 2/3 of the state. So, and so I always like try to think like, how do we make this, if something's statewide, let's make it actually statewide. And so that'd be something we'd work through as well. I think it would be great to have statewide one. If anyone wants to jump on that, you give me a call and we'll start working through that process.
Sheila's just got to jump off. Any other questions? Thoughts, comments?
We were so good.
I know, covered it really well. I sort of was going to ask a little bit more detail maybe on, I mean, given the area where where we work in innovation and small business, can you give an example of sort of incubating small businesses? And this is the question that I asked about the statewide one would be, so if you had a co-op that was very focused on incubating small businesses, what does that look like? And if as members wanted to continue to be added over time, as you kind of grew this thing, and would they make decisions around who they invest in and then who they don't? You're nodding, Davey. So Is that how that would work if we created one that was very focused on incubation, for example?
Yeah, and so I think you had a couple things there, is that you can structure your co-op to be as limited or as vague as you want. So like Crucibles is a worker co-op, and it's in outside of Bozeman. It is a wonderful example of a workers co-op, but it is very structured to limit who can be a member, because again, these are not public entities. These are private corporations at the end of the day. So they structured it to where you had to be a welder, you had to have so much background and blah, they have it. So it's very limited. Just Joe Blow can't join. We have other co-ops though that are very community based, and that they are really focused, like what Vaughn was saying, the community's there, or Muscle Shell. And so you can have a very vague or detailed scope of work, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so if you wanted to, Carl, create a statewide investing co-op that is focused on microloan program for startup or sustaining small rural businesses, we could do that. And then the other thing is about membership. So when we start structuring it, you do have kind of, you set when you file into the Secretary of State, you then start gaining your membership, and you kind of set a time, like saying, oh, okay, you've ran the numbers and you know that you need at least 200 members to make this go. And at 50 members, you're like, I'm comfortable, I can get them. And so you kind of have a one point in time that you have to have so many members, but then you can continue to add members throughout the life of the co-op. It's not like it's a hard dead stop that, oh, we're incorporated, that's all the membership we can get. So you can continue to add, so you can continue to show that investment and everything, and attract more into your cooperative.
Yeah, and I'll add two things to that in terms of that one of my favorite parts about a co-op is it is a perpetual business, and so you should be able to have members leave and join, and board members leave and join. It should never disrupt the actual co-op. It should exist well beyond the initial people who are setting it up, which is one of my favorite things about them. We have co-ops in the state that are 115 years old, and it's great. And then the other thing in terms of business incubation that I've seen some examples of investment co-ops doing is that they will, purchase a business, and then they put in these small businesses in there, and they do a lease with them for 2 to 3 years, with the hopes that they will either purchase that space or they'll be grow out of that space. And then they kind of have this sort of rotating group of small businesses going through there. The other thing that is really interesting, that's it's not set up like a co-op, but it's something that when I saw, I thought this would be a great co-op, is there is, and I can't remember where it's at, but they basically found an empty lot and they put on those little sheds, and they would do these pop-up markets for these small businesses, and they would have those go for like a month at a time, and then try to get some of those businesses some more exposure, and hopefully try to get them so that they were able to start getting into some physical locations. And I can't remember where I saw that at, but when I saw that, I thought this would be a great idea for investment co-op. If there was, just getting a storefront for a small business could have a huge impact. I know that Butte did that a couple of years back. They kind of had these storefronts that they invested in so that these small businesses could be in these storefronts for a few months at a time, get the exposure, and kind of build up their capital so they could buy their own storefront. And so I saw that and I was like, that would be a great thing for a co-op to work on. So there are lots of options. Like I said, there's so much flexibility. There's so many interesting ways you can go about it, but those are a couple other ways that I think would work really well for that sort of small business incubation, apart from the microloan program.
And then you take the example of what like Sanguda did. Their biggest thing was real estate. They had some businesses interested, but they couldn't find the facility, or they didn't have the means to do the real estate part. So the co-op bought the business, the building, the physical building, and then they incubated that business. And as a business grew, they kind of did a lease to own, almost like you grow into it you'll buy this from us. And I think it's Crow's Nest is doing the same thing along their main street, is that they've done a number of business rehab. So their main street's looking more and more beautiful every time that they do this. And then they incubate a business, that business buys it, and then they are able to roll that profit over into a new building. They incubate another business, and then they go through. So the way that they're changing their entire community front based on this kind of incubation and rehab process is pretty cool.
It's amazing to see it kind of come to work. And you've only been working on this particular type of co-op now for a couple of years, is that right?
Yeah, so my predecessor started it when Jan first started looking at it, and we did the muscle show. So about 5 years ago is really when it came to NCDC's focus point. And Jan should be given kudos for really bringing the Alberta model in, really kind of making it so we knew that we could do it. One thing that maybe again we'll pick up is whether or not at some point we will be able to do like self-IRA investment. Right now that's not allowed. And hopefully someday we were working on it previously. And maybe we'll pick that up and be able to see if we can't figure out a way to do that again. But that's the biggest difference between the Alberta models and us, is they can do kind of their IRA process. You can direct some into local, and we can't. So that's one area that I would love to see us grow and focus in on. But right now we know we can do the basic. And yeah, it's been, I would say about 5 years, but I would say the last year, partly because Davey loves them, we're seeing a lot of growth for it. Well, and I think Butte said it best. We were on a call, Butte Food Hub. We were on a call with Arrow talking about Food Hub. And Chrissy from Butte Food Co-op said, co-ops are the response when they're needed in time. So if you look throughout the history, late 1890s throughout the early 1900s is where you see a ton of the farm co-ops were formed. And as Davey mentioned, we just finished working with a co-op that was formed in 1902. And it was an ag one. And so you saw those in the 30s. We saw the rural electrification of the entire US, and mostly through co-ops, because they needed to come together. Their community had to come together, and they brought those electric in. 50s and 60s, we saw the telecom start because there was no other options. And I think now that we're coming out of a COVID crisis and there's just needs, like we're seeing needs around housing, around childcare, around workforce. We have to start figuring out our food systems. People are saying, wait, we can do this. We have the model. And so we have seen an uptick. I was on a call, though. I think Montana is leading that uptick, because I was on a call with our counterparts across the US yesterday, and we're talking about projects. Davey and the team has over 50 co-op projects in Montana right now. We are well leading that based on what the other counterparts are saying. So they're all seeing upticks, but I think Montana is definitely going to kind of be leading this charge of saying we can work together. We can find collaborative, cooperative solutions to these needs. And let's move that dial forward. Let's stop talking about, oh my goodness, we need childcare. Let's actually build childcare. Let's talk about our main streets have blight and they have areas. Let's stop talking about what we can do and start doing it. And I think that the cooperative model, and of course I'm biased, but I think the cooperative model is really starting to see, or people are starting to see, like we can do it through that and make a big difference.
Yeah, excellent. I just got two more questions in the chat quickly here. Matthew asked, does it have to be an individual that invests or buys shares, or could it be another business?
So I just answered him in the chat, but I don't know that we went over that, but no, absolutely not. You can definitely set up your co-op so that you can set up your co-op so that any entity can be a member or buy preferred shares. It depends on how the co-op wants to define its membership and its membership requirements. But a lot of the investment co-ops we're working with, especially around the housing childcare, those are almost exclusively business owners. And so it's the business actually making the investment, not the individual. And so you can set that up however you want. You could set it up so you could have multiple levels of membership. You could have a community member and you could have a business member. And maybe that business member has a different buy-in and they get a few different membership benefits, because you do get some benefits as a member. So there's lots of ways to structure that. But in my opinion, especially for these types of co-ops, I think having a larger pool to draw from and making that and including businesses is a very, very, very smart way to go about it. I think businesses should be involved in that because this is their community. These are their patrons. I mean, these are their folks. So I do encourage that you include them. Nonprofits could also be a member. Municipalities can be members. It just depends on how you set it up. But I think with this type, especially having all of the options available is probably a smarter way to go, unless you want to be very specific about it. But generally, we're not seeing that as much unless it's specific for businesses trying to do housing or childcare or something like that.
Yeah, that issue, childcare in particular, makes a lot of sense that businesses pool their resources. Yeah. Any last questions? We just got a couple more minutes here to the top of the hour. Any last? I don't see anything in the chat at the moment. My chat seems to be slow though. Take yourself off mute. Raise your hand. Well, not hearing any. Thank you all. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Vaughn, Davey, Tracy. Thank you for the presentation. That was fabulous and answering all the questions. Keep up the great work and hopefully we'll see a few more. I know maybe you're overloaded now, but maybe this call will stimulate a few more investment co-ops to get started. So we'll send some your way. Davey.
We would love that. We're good with it. Thank you for hosting. We appreciate it. We appreciate the partnership. So thank you, Carl. And if anybody needs anything, call Davey. No.
And we will be following up with a recording and such. And yes, we'll have all that contact information in there for everybody. So thank you all for participating. Have a great day.